Hi, I'm Scott Humphrey with the World Floor Covering Association, and this is Leadership Live. And this week on the lead story, I want to dive a little deeper into the story I shared with you last week, the contrast in leadership between Shackleton and the Endurance that went to the South Pole, and Stephenson and the Carluck that went to the North Pole. You'll remember that Shackleton's team actually all survived. Both ships got stuck in ice, but Shackleton's team all survived, and the Carluck had 11 of its members die. And the difference in leadership. And one of the things I want to dive into a little deeper today is how trust impacts leadership, especially when the course changes. And so if you look at the story of Shackleton, they were planning on going to the South Pole, crossing over and making a cross over the entire continent of Antarctica. They get stuck in there, and suddenly Shackleton, still focused on his people, decides that the new mission is not to get across Antarctica anymore, it's to survive. And he really builds trust with his people by doing a few things. One is he leads from within. So whatever he asked them to do, in fact, he had a daily group of chores that they all had to do, and they would switch them up so you never got bored with doing the same thing. And whatever they did, he did as well. Shackleton's a great example that once you gain trust, it becomes difficult to lose it. But once you lose trust, like what happened with Stephenson and the Carluck at the North Pole, it's very difficult to gain it back. In fact, it becomes difficult to trust what is real. Even the real seems unreal. Ultimately, the importance is that people can trust what you say and that you live your example. You'll remember there were multiple times in Shackleton's 2 years, basically 2 years, where he set the example and led the way. But ultimately, the biggest one is when his team finally got to Elephant Island, an uninhabited island, and he decides that they're going to reinforce one of these lifeboats, and they're going to make one of the most amazing voyages ever, 800 miles across the worst seas in the world to try to get to South Georgia Island. Rather than Shackleton sending someone else, he was the first to volunteer to go, and he handpicked the people that would go with him. And one of the people he picked, not because they would be helpful to him on the voyage, but because he knew that person would be detrimental to the people who stayed because he had turned negative. And so Shackleton took that person. Establishing trust is so essential. And it reminds me of a humorous story that I want to give credit where credit is due. I often get my stories from someone else. But I heard my pastor, Mark Carr, recently share this story in a sermon. It's about a young man who had wanted to be a paratrooper. He wanted to be that all his life. And so he finally gets the chance. He's in paratrooping school, and he's up on the plane. He gets a little nervous, and the instructor says, listen, we're all going to jump out one after the other. Just count to 5 and jump out. And he said, once you get out in the air, he said, you're going to take your right hand, pull over to your left hip, and you'll pull the chute, and the parachute will come out. Now, if by some chance that doesn't happen, then you just wait a few seconds, take your left hand, pull over to your right hip, and that's where the emergency chute is, and it will definitely come out. And there will be trucks now waiting for you at the bottom when you land to pick you back up and take you up, and we'll do it again. Well, this guy gets a little nervous, so they end up having to kick him out, and he gets out in the air, and he counts to 10. He takes his right hand, pulls over to his left hip. Nothing happened. But he's not nervous because he remembers there's an emergency chute. So he waits a few seconds, takes his left hand, pulls over to his right hip. Oh, lo and behold, the emergency chute didn't open either. He's sailing down through the sky, and he passes several guys whose parachutes have already opened up, and they hear him say, yeah, I bet them trucks won't be down there either. Well, sometimes when we lose trust in something, we lose trust in everything. It's important for the leader to be optimistic. It's one of the things that was noted by everybody who kept a journal on the Endurance with Shackleton, is they noted his eternal optimism. No matter what happened, he was optimistic. Ironically, what's funny is when they got Shackleton's journal, he often was realistic and said that he didn't know if they were going to make it. But he never let them see that. He maintained, established the trust, and he did that by leading from within and by living the example. You've got a phenomenal story to tell. Maybe it's not Shackleton, but it's your story. Go out there and live the story that you want other people to tell.